hours of past, 20 years of past learnings, and future vision. We're excited you can join us today for Rush, Pochiraju, and Pedro Lopes session, Transforming Your Data State, Beating the End of Support of SQL Server 28 and R2. This 24 hours of past consists of 24 consecutive live webinars delivered by expert speakers from the past community. The sessions will be recorded and posted online after the event. You'll receive an email letting you know when these become available. My name is Eric Romero. I'm from Pass HQ, and I have a few introductory slides before I hand over the reins to Pedro and Raj. If you require any technical assistance, please type the question in the question pane located on the right side of your screen, and someone will assist you. This question pane is also where you may ask any questions throughout the presentation. Feel free to enter your questions at any time, and Raj will answer those questions. You're also able to zoom in into the presentation content by using the zoom button located on the top of the presentation window. Please note that there will be a short evaluation after the webinar ends, which will pop up in your web browser. Your feedback is really important for us, so please take a moment to complete this session. I would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Microsoft and Intel. The staging of 24 hours of past wouldn't be possible without their generous support, and they are the reason this event is available free of charge. Microsoft SQL Server is a business analytics and data management platform. It's secure, easy to manage, and gives their customers peace of mind and confidence in the security of their data. SQL Server combines scalable performance with end-to-end business intelligence and built-in analytic solutions. It can be used on premises, in the cloud, or in hybrid environments. Intel expands the boundaries of technology to make the most amazing experience possible. Information about Intel and the work of its more than 100,000 employees can be found at newsroom.intel.com and intel.com. If you would like to learn more about Microsoft or Intel and sign up for information on how they can help you, please visit the sponsor page in the 24 Hours of Past website. Keep learning year long. Visit pass.org and check out all of the free educational resources available to PASS members. Connect, share, and learn. And also, don't forget that PASS Summit 2019 will be happening on November 5th in Seattle, Washington. Head over to passsummit.com and register today. This 24 Hours of PASS session is presented by Raj and Pedro. Raj has worked with Microsoft for over 14 years and is currently working with the Azure Data Group. As a principal program manager, he's primarily responsible for enabling data migrations to modern on-premises SQL Server, and Azure VM, and Azure SQL database platforms. Pedro is a senior program manager in the Database Systems Group with focus on SQL Server's relational engine and programmability space. He has extensive background in the performance tuning and optimization and also connects closely with several high-profile SQL Server customers and partners in the field to understand more about the product usage and gather feedback that drives improvement back into the product. And without further ado, here's Raj and Pedro with Transforming Your Data State, Beating the End of Support of SQL Server 28 and R2. Pedro and Raj?
Thank you, Eric. So we'll start by diving directly into it. End of support for SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 is just upon us. It's less than 6 months away. Now, SQL Server already has one of the longest support life cycles in the industry with 10 years. So this date has been there scheduled, fixed in the calendar for 10 years, almost 10 years now. We provide 5 years of mainstream support. And in those first 5 years, what we do is we provide not only fixes for the product, but also enhancements in functionality. We close gaps that may exist in certain behaviors. And obviously, we maintain functionality throughout this first 5 years. Then in the next subsequent 5 years, we continue to provide what we call extended support, which consists primarily of security updates that may be released for versions that are in this state. For example, SQL Server 2008 has been in extended support for obviously almost 5 years now, but just last January, when the industry was hit with those issues around Spectral and Meltdown, we had to release security fixes that obviously encompassed our products, and SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 already at the end of their extended support, they still receive these updates. Now, Windows Server 2008 and 2008 R2 will also cease extended support, meaning they will come to the end of their 10-year life cycle, but that only comes in early January 2020. Now, many organizations running workloads on Windows Server 2008 and on SQL Server 2008 and R2, obviously, will want to continue using the current platform that they have, although do it in a way that's safer, that complies with your industry's requirements, for example, and you need to do that in a way that allows you to continue to be supported by the manufacturer, in this case by Microsoft. So the impact of this end of support means that there will not be any security updates past these dates for these products you see on the screen. That will raise most probably compliance concerns. There are certain industries that are heavily regulated, and part of being compliant, which means part of actually being able to do business, relies on the fact that your systems, your platforms remain fully supported by their vendors, in this case, Microsoft. There's also the point of, by remaining in such old versions, you may be missing a number of innovation opportunities, such as using new features that will make the value for money that you take out of your investments in Windows and SQL Server that much better. So when you are able to move to a newer platform where you are able to leverage, for example, in SQL Server, technologies like in-memory OLTP or column store, or in more recent versions, adaptive query processing, those will, out of the box, improve your workloads just by moving from those older versions to the newer versions, and with little effort, and you maximize your investment here. Now, it's also important to understand that we do realize that you may have just gotten aware that this date is upon us, especially for SQL Server, and I have some more I want to talk about this in the next few slides. So the end of support is upon us, like I said, and let's look at the options that we have to modernize and to move away from that unsupported state that you may be at in a few months. So one is to modernize to on-premises. I'll actually start from the ground up. Maybe you want to leverage the investments you've made on-premises in your data center already, and we still hold your hand in that. So you can upgrade on-premises. You can, for example, upgrade 2008 all the way up to SQL Server 2017 and Windows Server 2016, or you can optionally stay as is in 2008 and purchase something we call the Extended Security Updates. Now, Extended Security Updates, or ESU for short, is something that we are allowing some customers that need more time to modernize to still remain supported by Microsoft. And you can either purchase that ESU for 3 years, and as you see on the screen there, the cost is approximately 75% of the licensing that you have, and that's 75% of the license every year for the next 3 years that you need to remain supported on those specific SQL 2008 instances. Alternatively, you can move actually these SQL Server 2008 and 2008 R2 to Azure VMs that run SQL 2008 and 2008 R2, and with that, you get these extended security updates for free, as we see up here. So that's another way, is to actually modernize and step into Azure from the get-go. Take this opportunity that you need, that SQL Server 2008 end of support presents, to actually start modernizing to Azure. And at the first step, with maybe the minimum minimum impact to the way that you work today, which is simply moving to IaaS virtual machines where Microsoft handles the underlying high availability, the underlying maintaining the underlying infrastructure that supports your VM, and you are still in full control of what sits inside the VM, so namely the OS and in this case SQL Server. So you can basically move as is to that 2008 and 2008 R2. Or if you are actually ready to modernize to a newer version, but you still need to maintain SQL Server rather than moving to Azure SQL Database, then you can also do that supported on Azure virtual machines, but moving all the way to a newer version of SQL Server itself. Now, if you want to actually lift and shift to a full platform as a service, then you can go with, for example, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. This is a service that we debuted recently, and Azure SQL Database Managed Instance is indeed an instance of SQL Server that's fully managed, which means that it's not a singleton database service, but rather it's a platform that's compatible with versions as far back as SQL 2008, because we do keep the notion of database compatibility levels, and the earliest we support is SQL 2008, which means that you can lift and shift your SQL Server 2008 all the way up to managed instance while keeping the same database compat level. Obviously, that's available also in SQL Server 2017, but it's especially useful by maintaining your control over functionality when you move to a full PaaS service. Now, being a PaaS service, that means that we take care of managing everything that sits below the level of your database instance, which means that you can dedicate more of your time to actually managing your data, productizing and monetizing your data, rather than more menial tasks that you may have to do when you run your own data center. Now, approaches to modernization, you have a number of them. And you can upgrade, and that's the first one you see on the screen here. And upgrade means you can upgrade your existing applications using your existing investments in your data center. That is maybe the one that has least friction, especially if you have very recent investments in your own data center. So we fully support you there. You can modernize to SQL Server, to modern SQL Server, leverage features and leverage new levels of performance and availability that come with these new versions. But you can also take this opportunity to rehost, to lift and shift. Like I mentioned, move, for example, for VMs, irrespective of the version that you are looking at. So you can actually take those applications as is and start benefiting from some aspects of the cloud without the risks of actually making any code changes, because you are hosting, after all, in a VM that sits in Azure. Now, one step ahead of that is the refactor. Now, when you refactor, means that you take advantage of the infrastructure as a service together with platform as a service. So you can actually have little to no code changes and start leveraging the refactoring your application to work with parts in a VM. For example, your application layer resides in a VM, and your database already resides in Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, for example, which is a fully PaaS service. Now, you may actually want to completely re-architect the entire application, which means that then you'll start to also think of software as a service. And in this case, modernize the application layer itself to move completely into a PaaS service, which is resilient, which can scale, which can be independently deployable, and it's fully born in the cloud. And obviously, you can go all the way to the other extreme. So we move from upgrading and leveraging your investments in your own on-premises data centers to completely rebuilding the application from scratch and born in the cloud and making sure that it's highly scalable, globally available. So all these options are available to your journey, at any point you wish to start. And Microsoft is with you along the way. Now, the migration journey, like I mentioned, starts on premises. It can go all the way to Azure. So with this, we provide a number of tools that will allow you to gain more insight every step of the way. We allow you to and we work with you to assess your current state, and that will involve all the stakeholders. We will help you calculate the TCO for the current and the future state that you'll be in. We'll help you to discover and evaluate your current applications and the data platform itself, to then do actually the migration itself and to select one of several migration strategies that fit your requirements for downtime, for example. And then we have tools and processes to help you apply that migration strategy. And we have tools and obviously a partner ecosystem to help you do this. Then it's the optimized part. Now, if you are looking to modernize the application, you also want to optimize your costs, optimize your return of investment, and optimize your cost of ownership. So it's important to understand where you can optimize your system to be able to take some of the cost that you had that was unnecessary and reinvest that back into your business and to further optimize this journey, which then on the other end needs a very secure and completely manageable infrastructure and a completely manageable ecosystem, because we'll be able to leverage when you go all the way up to the newer versions of SQL Server and Azure SQL Database, the highest levels of protection, both for your data, but also security overall of your platform, and obviously real-time monitoring that allows you to have insight as to what's going on in your system, but also to provide intelligence that allows you to leverage adaptability to make sure that your system can actually correct itself and that it can be adaptive to ongoing conditions that run through your data usages. Now, then over to Raj, because he's going to talk about how we can actually take these on-premises ecosystems and put you all the way into a more modern SQL Server, which includes obviously Azure SQL Database and SQL Server. Take it away, Raj.
Thank you so much, Pedro. Hello, everyone. Pedro talked about the various phases in the migration journey. He talked about assessment, migrate, optimize, and secure and manage phases. So what I'm going to do here is that I'm going to introduce you some of the tools and services that our team built that help you to navigate through this migration journey. And within that migration journey, the main focus is assess and as well as the migrate phases. Before I introduce you the tools and services, I want to talk about the specific source and target pairs that we support migrating using these tools and services that we built. So on the left side, you see that these are the various sources that we support migrating to various targets on the Azure. On the right side that you are seeing here. So when it comes to the source and target pairs, the sources is we support migrating all the way from SQL Server 2005, 2017 to Azure SQL Database Singleton, Azure SQL Database Elastic Pools, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, and as well as the SQL servers which are running on the Azure VMs. And when it comes to heterogeneous platforms like Oracle, Sybase, DB2, we support migrating those sources to the respective Azure targets as well. In the case of open sources, we support migrating from MySQL and as well as the PostgreSQL to Azure Database for MySQL and Azure Database for PostgreSQL, so that you can perform a lift and shift migration over there. And when it comes to the NoSQL databases, we support migrating from MongoDB to Cosmos DB. And not only that, we support migrating from on-premises environment, we also help you to migrate from the other cloud vendors like AWS, SQL servers which are running on the AWS RDS. You can migrate to the four SQL database targets that I mentioned on the Azure. Same thing, whether if it is running on a Google Cloud, you can migrate those SQL servers and other databases to Azure as well. So those are the broad spectrum of sources and targets that we support today. and the support for more source and target pairs are going to come in our future releases as well. Now, given that we understand the source and target pairs, let's examine the specific tools and services that our team built to navigate you through the migration journey. And if you think the assessment as the first phase, where there are 3 different tools that we built that really help you through the assessment phase. SQL Server Migration Assistant tool primarily help you to assess your on-premises Oracle, Sybase DB2 heterogeneous sources, and then identify the schema conversions and provide recommendations to convert the schema to support and compatible with the target Azure that you choose. And not only that, it's going to provide recommendations how to convert that schema. At times, it also auto convert or auto transform your schema that is supported on the Azure targets as well. And when it comes to the SQL Server sources, the tool called Data Migration Assistant tool, this tool help you to assess your on-premises SQL Server environment, and it finds out, it also recommends you the optimal Azure target that you can choose that best fits your on-premises workload with minimal migration effort that you can migrate to. It also tells you the specific size that you would want to start with after migrating to the Azure, the specific SKU that you would want to use it. And it also provides you the specific set of objects in your schema, that are going to, if there are any specific objects that are going to break migrating to Azure, it provides, not only it identifies those objects, but also provides the comprehensive recommendations how to fix those objects after the migration is done. And there is another tool called Database Experimentation Assistant tool. This tool really helps you to validate your performance on the target, so that you can get a confidence on how your target is going to respond to your business applications after the migration is done. So basically, this tool is going to collect the performance data of your source workload, and then try to replay that workload on the target, and then provides a comparative analysis on how the workload is really performed on the source versus target, so that you will really get a good understanding on how your target is going to respond to your applications after the migration is done. So these are the 3 different tools that you can use to go through the assessment phase. And after the assessment is done, the next phase is to do the actual schema and database migrations. Now that is where you will be using our service called Azure Database Migration Service, also called Azure DMS, that you can use to really perform both offline and as well as the online migrations. So Azure Database Migration Service is a fully managed service on the Azure. We first released for general availability 2018 May. Since then, we were able to migrate more than 50,000 databases using this service so far. And then this service has built-in resiliency built into the system, where if there are any, we know that the migration prone to any of the intermittent network failures, and when those failures happens, the Azure Database Migration Service fully understands that, and then when the network is restored, it will restore the migration from where the failure happened. It also supports both offline and as well as online migrations. The online migrations are specifically designed to minimize your downtime during the migration time, so that to provide a near zero downtime migration experience for you. So as we understand the tools and services that we support to help you to navigate through this migration journey, let's examine a couple of these models that Pedro talked about. Pedro talked about the various approaches and strategies that the customers are adapting to migrate to the cloud, and then specifically examine the lift and shift, which is rehost scenario here. In the rehost scenario, your applications are hosted on-prem data center, and these applications are hosted on Windows 2000 Server 2008 R2, and your database is running on a SQL Server 2008 R2. And now you want to migrate these apps and as well as the database layer to Azure. At that point, you can use our Azure Site Recovery Service, which is also a fully managed service on the Azure, which really helps you to migrate the Windows servers that are hosting your web and app layers to Azure Azure VMs actually. And at the same time, you can also use the Azure Site Recovery to migrate your servers which are hosting the SQL Server 2008 R2 you can migrate as it is to Azure SQL servers which are running on the Azure VMs using the Azure Site Recovery. So Pedro, do you have any further comments on this approach actually? Okay, so looks like Pedro gone offline a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was muted. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But what I was trying to say, unsuccessfully, is that at the end we do have one session recommendation, which quite complements this one in the sense that we actually tackle the migration process itself, and specifically how do these tools fit into the migration process that you will need to run, or at least that we recommend you to run. So this is a good segue for that.
Sounds good. Thank you, Pedro. So let's now examine the other model that we have, our strategy that the customers are really adapting, migrating to cloud. As you see here, the on-premises workload, which is running on web and application layers, running on the Windows Server 2008 R2, and the database layer is running on SQL Server 2008 R2. Now, what you can do is you can use the Azure Site Recovery Service to migrate the application layers as it is to application layers which are running on the Azure VMs. And at the same time, in case if you decide that you want to migrate your database to platform as a service, where you want to migrate to Azure's SQL Database Managed Instance, then that is the time that you could use Azure Database Migration Service to perform an online migration with near zero downtime migration. So these are the two different approaches that you can adapt. And then specifically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a demo that really navigate you through to the cloud journey using this specific approach that you can choose. Now, what I'm going to do is here I'm going to showcase some of the DMA assessment results that you could really leverage to assess your on-premises environment to see what it really takes to migrate these databases to the platform as a service. So this assessment is particularly performed against the databases which are running on the SQL Server 2008, as you see here, and then with an intent that you want to migrate them to Azure SQL Database Singleton databases. And for the sake of the time, I'm just showing the results here. I already performed the assessment. And as you see here, there are a couple of options provided here. One is the SQL Server feature parity and the compatibility assessment. In the case of SQL Server feature parity, we look at all the surface level features at the SQL Server instance level, and then identify some of those features that are not supported on the target environment that you have chosen here. For example, in this case, there are at least 7 features that currently in use in your on-premises workload that are not supported migrating to Azure SQL Database in this case. As you see here, cross-database reference queries are not supported on the Azure SQL Database, and then SQL Server agent jobs are not supported. Instead of that, the recommendation is used to Azure Elastic jobs, and depending on how many number of jobs, you could decide whether you want to switch those jobs to Elastic jobs, or if there are too many jobs that it's too much effort, then maybe that is something that might not be feasible for you. So we strongly recommend you to look at all the unsupported features, and there are some features that are partially supported, which means that they're supported, but the functionality could be a little different migrating to Azure SQL Database. So this is the assessment really gives you the feature parity results for you. That really helps you to determine whether you want to migrate to Azure SQL Database or Azure SQL Database Managed Instance, where the Azure SQL Database Managed Instance provides 100% or close to 100% compatibility with your on-premises instance model, where all these features are fully supported on the Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. And in the next screen, as you see here, I want to share the compatibility issues assessment here. As you see here, there are a couple of databases that I assessed which are running on the SQL 2008. And then there are multiple categories here. The very first category that I want you to look at is the migration blockers. So some of these objects that are reported in this category, they might break migrating to Azure SQL Database. So if you don't fix these objects, the business functionality, which is kind of leveraging some of the objects that are listed here, in this case, it is a employee office stored procedure, that functionality will break. So you want to make sure that you provide a fix for this that supports with the on-premise with the target Azure SQL database after the migration is done. Not only that, we identify the issue here, we pinpoint you the specific object that has this issue. We also provide you the line number and column number so that you can very easily locate the area that you need to fix it. And we also provide you the comprehensive recommendation as well. That really helps you how to fix those objects as well. So the migration blockers are definitely your highest priority that you need to look for. And there is a behavioral change as well, where the specific objects that are reported on these issues, they might continue to work from the functional standpoint of view, but you might see some kind of a behavioral experiences. For example, in the case of unqualified joins, the queries might still work, but you might really experience some sort of a performance degradation because of the changes that we made to the query optimizer. So those are the things that you would want to look at as the next priority. And the deprecated features are these features are these issues are only provided for informational at this point, and these issues are not really a migration blockers for you. It's just that some of these features might be removed in the feature versions of the SQL Server, but it will not really impact your migrations at this point. We only recommend you to stop using some of these features in the new development that you might have. So that is kind of an analysis that you can really leverage the DMA tool to really assess your on-premises environment and find out what it really takes to migrate these specific environments to platform as a service. So now, once the assessment is done, the next step is to migrate your schema, migrate your data, and migrate the server objects like SQL Server agent jobs, logins that you would want to migrate, so that you can have a comprehensive entire SQL Server migration experience to begin with. So before I showcase the migration using our Azure Database Migration Service, I want to spend some time to talk about and provide you the architecture of the Azure Database Migration Service. So this slide looks very busy, but I'm going to go slow on this a little bit. As you see here on the very right side, you have your on-premises environment. It could be SQL Server, or it could be heterogeneous sources as well. And you want to migrate these databases to cloud. And now you also have a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises network and as well as the Azure network. And this can be done in 3 different ways. Either you can have an express route connectivity, or you have a site-to-site VPN connection, or you can have a point-to-site connectivity as well. So we would want you to establish your site-to-site connectivity using any of these three approaches that are listed here. And then the very first step is that you would want to create a Azure Database Migration Service on the Azure portal before you start your migration. And when you create that service is created in your own subscription. And then there are 3 different ways that you can really interact with that service. You can interact with Azure portal. And if you want to really automate those migrations, you can use our PowerShell commandlets that are provided to completely automate those migrations as well. Or if you really want to integrate these migrations into some of the tools that you have already built, then you can use the CLI components to do that kind of integrations as well. So these are the 3 different ways that you can really interact with the Azure Database Migration Service. And each time that you send an action or a request to the DMS service, that request will go to the Azure Resource Manager at first. And then when you really create the DMS service in your own subscription, the actual DMS core engine will be deployed into a virtual machine, which is provisioned in the Microsoft subscription. But the way that the VM can interact with your cloud environment and as well as with your on-premises environment is by means of the VNet injection. So we take the VNet that you provide to the DMS service during the provisioning experience, and then we inject that VNet into the virtual machine. That way the virtual machine will be able to access your cloud subscription and as well as your on-premises environment. And then we also have a custom resource provider. So all the requests that are coming through the resource manager will route it through the DMS resource provider, and then those requests will go into the service bus queue. And then we use the Azure storage account to store only the metadata about the service, but we don't really store any data from your environment. All your data is going to be sitting in either in your own subscription or at on-premises environment. So we don't really access your data. We only store the metadata that is required about your migration experience, and that will be stored in the Azure storage account. So that's how the entire service is architected. So we are going to be using this service to do the online migration from your SQL Server environment to Azure SQL Database Manager instance. And before I go to the demo, I want to explain how online migration works with the DMS. So you have your on-premises environment here, and then you want to migrate these databases to Azure SQL Database Manager instance, which is sitting in your cloud subscription. And then you also have a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises environment and then the cloud network. And then you already created a DMS instance in your subscription. One thing that we use is when it comes to the online migrations, DMS uses the existing backups. That means we leverage your full database backup and as well as the transaction log backups to do the migration actually. And DMS will not perform any backups. Instead we will use the backups that you might already have as part of your disaster recovery plan, and we just leverage those backups. So you provide those backups to us in the SMB network share. And as soon that we see those backups are available, the DMS will upload those backup files to the Azure Blob Storage. And this is Azure Blob Storage is something that you provide in your own subscription. And then these backup files will be uploaded to the Blob Storage. And then at first we will be restoring the full database backup. And then we start looking for the subsequent log backups. As the log backups available, we keep uploading them and then we keep restoring them onto the managed instance. And this process continuously happens until you say that you are ready to do the cutover. When you are ready to do the cutover, at that point you stop all the incoming traffic to the on-premises SQL Server environment, and then you take the final log backup. We call that as the tail log backup, and then provide that log backup into your network share. And then we upload that backup, and then we will restore the final backup to the SQL DB managed instance, and then we bring the target database online. So that's how the online migration works. So if you look at the entire process, you will not be having any downtime, any sort of downtime until you're ready to do the cutover. So during the whole time, we look for your backups and we upload and we restore them. And the business for your applications is as usual. They keep on connecting to your source environment and do all those transactions. It will not impact your on-premises business. But when you are ready to do the cutover, that's the time that you take the log backup and then upload and then restore. That is the only time that you have the downtime. So that can be reduced to as much as of 15 minutes time frame, usually on an average. You can achieve the migration to Azure SQL Database Manager instance. So having said that, now I'm going to switch my context to showcase the demo here. And then for showing the demo, here is the context. I have my SQL Server 2008 R2 instance running, and then you see that there are a bunch of databases here. I particularly select my HR database to migrate this from on-premises SQL Server 2008 R2 to the managed instance that I already provisioned here. So that is kind of a context here. For that, there are 3 different steps as we talked about. The very first step is that you need to create a DMS instance, and then you start the migration project. And then at the end, the third step, you would do the migration cutover when you're ready to do the cutover. So at first, let me go to the create experience here. Like I said, the Azure Database Migration Service is fully managed service on the Azure. So you create a resource here. You use the create resource command on the Azure portal, and then look for the migration service. And you find Azure Database Migration Service here. And then you hit a create button. Here in this blade, it's very simple actually. You provide a few steps here, like you create a name, you give a name to it, and then you pick a subscription where you want to create your DMS service. And then you can choose existing resource group or create a new resource group where we keep all the cloud resources that we need for the service. And then you choose a specific region where you want to create the service. We typically recommend to create the service in the same region as the target managed instance for the optimal migration experience. So the next step is virtual network. You need to choose a virtual network, and this is the most important step in the creation of the DMS service. This is the virtual network which will provide the DMS, the connectivity to both source and the targets. And if you choose a wrong VNet here, then you will run into the migration issues where you will not be able to connect to source and targets. We try to provide you as much information as needed to help you to pick the right virtual network. But also we provided a documentation here which describes the various network topologies that we commonly saw in our customer environments, how they configure their DMS instance. And there are 4 different network topologies are described here. I'm going to talk about one scenario here where you have your on-premises SQL servers, and then you also have an express route connected between your on-premises network and Azure. And then so when you create a DMS instance, you use the VNet, and then the same VNet that is being used for the managed instance as well. But instead of putting them into the same subnet as MI, you created a separate subnet for DMS because you cannot create any other resources in the subnet used for MI. So you have to create a separate subnet for DMS in the same VNet, and then you create that one. That way, the DMS can be able to talk to managed instances here. And then the same VNet is attached to the Express gateway. That way, it can able to contact the on-premises environment here as well. So that's how the simple configuration can happen. So essentially, the same VNet that is being used for both MI and as well as the DMS, but the DMS is created in a separate subnet. That is the topology that you could use. Another topology that you could use is if the SQL Server already running on the SQL VM, now you want to migrate to managed instance where everything is in the same VNet again, but MI is on a separate subnet, but both DMS and source SQL VM are still sharing the same subnet within that VNet. That way DMS can be able to contact source and targets. Right, but in the case where MI is on a separate VNet, you can still be able to establish the connectivity by creating a VNet peering between the VNet used for MI and VNet used for DMS. So these are the various topologies that you could use, and you pick the topology that best works for you. We also provided all the network ports that you need to use to enable the network rules and everything, firewall reports that you need to open. All that information is provided in this document. So I strongly recommend you to review this document in our doc site before you can start creating the DMS instance. So I pick my VNet here, and then the next step is I'm going to select the size of the DMS that I want to create. There are 2 different SKUs provided, standard and premium tiers. Standard is always free. You don't have to pay for it. It comes up with 3 different SKUs, but it only supports offline migration. That means your migration downtime starts from the time that you start your migration. But whereas in the premium, which supports the online migrations, which only comes with 4 vCores today, this 4 vCores is provided free for next 6 months since the time that you create your DMS service. But if your migration goes beyond 6 months, then that's the time that we are going to start charging you. But for first 6 months, the 4 vCore premium is free, and if you are doing online migration, you will be using that. So I'm going to choose that one because I'm going to be doing the online migration, and then you hit a create button. So it would take around 10 to 12 minutes. So for the sake of the time, I'm not going to create, but I'm going to use the existing one here. And then, so I already created a demo DMS online West US to DMS service. We are going to use this DMS service to do the migration. The next stage is that you're going to create the migration project here. So I'm going to click on new migration project, where you provide your source and target information. And then we'll give you name to it, and then my source is SQL Server. Like I said, we support several other sources as well. And then my target is managed instance, SQL Database Managed Instance. And then this time I'm going to be performing an online migration. So I'm going to choose that option here. And then I'm just going to save and create the project to the next step. So here I'm going to provide my source SQL Server information in the source blade. I provide a fully qualified domain name here. We support both the Windows and the SQL authentication. I'm going to use Windows authentication here. And then I'm going to connect to the source. At this point, DMS is trying to connect to the source, make sure that the user provided has the right permissions to perform the migration. All those validations are going to happen there. And in the next screen, I'm going to provide an application ID, which we are going to use to connect all the specific cloud resources that that we need for this migration. So if you don't know how to create an app ID, we provided a in-depth documentation over there, step-by-step guidance that really helps you to create an app ID and as well as the key. We use this app ID and key to connect to target managed instance and as well as the Azure Blob storage where we need to upload the files. Now I'm going to choose my managed instance here. I also provide a SQL ID and authentication for the target managed instance. And I'm going in the next screen, I'm going to choose the specific databases that I want to migrate. You can perform the entire SQL Server as a whole so that you can do a lift and shift migration to MI, or you can pick specific databases. In this example, I'm going to pick my HR database. And then now you provide a few migration settings here. The very first thing is you provide a network share, a SMB network share that has the backup files that we can use. And you also provide a Windows account that the DMS can impersonate to read the files from that network share. And then you pick a subscription where you want us to use the blob storage that we can upload those files. And then this is the blob storage that we could use. And then in the advanced settings, you can rename your database as well on the target in case if you want to do it. So I'm going to rename it to pass demo. You save it. So basically what you did here is you provided SMB network share. You provided a Windows account that the DMS can use to read the backup files from this location and then upload to the storage account that you have chosen, and then restore the database as HRP pass demo onto the managed instance that you selected. So that's how it works. So now again, it's making all the validations to make sure that the SMB network share is valid. The user has the right permissions and all those validations are happens. While that is happening, now I got the summary here. Just give a name to it. Run migration now. And then you just hit run migration. And then now your migration is going to start. So as you see here, I already took a couple of backups here, or maybe 3 backups for the HR database as part of my disaster recovery. I got HR full backup, and I also have a couple of log backups, log backup 1 and log backup 2 that I provided in this network share as you see here. Now the DMS would know those backup files. I'm going to refresh this, and then I'm going to click on HR database here to find out what's the status of those backup files. It already uploaded those backup files, and pretty soon it is also going to start restoring those backup files as well. So I'm going to refresh this again. Now it is restoring. There are full backup is restored, 1 log backup is done, 2nd backup is done, is restoring right now, and your downtime is not started yet at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my source, and then I'm going to insert some values into my department table here. So here is my source. I'm inserting a new record into the source, past conference in Seattle, and then I'm going to take my final backup here, right, which is backup 3, right, that is done. And then now I'm going to go back to my here the DMS. The final backup is also, the 3rd backup is now uploaded, and at some point of time it is going to get restored as well. Once that is restored, you can start doing the cutover. So here in the cutover, make sure that there are no pending log backups left, because right now it shows as 1 because the 3rd backup that I just took, the 3rd log backup that I just took is not restored yet. That's the reason it is showing as 1. And you want to make sure that this value shows 0 before you confirm and then do the cutover. So it's going to take some time. Obviously, for the sake of the time, what I'm going to do is I pretend that the 3rd backup is also restored, and then I'm just going to confirm, and then I'm going to apply. At this point, the cutover is in progress. So it's going to make sure that it's going to bring the target database online at that point. So you can go back here and then see if the target backup is online already. So now it is in recovery. So it is in the process of bringing this database online as part of your cutover experience. So It might take a little, in a few seconds here and there, but that's how the online migrations really work. So hope you're going to be using in your upcoming migration projects to leverage the DMS service to do the migrations. Now, I just want to share some of the source and target pairs that we have, and some of the source and target pairs are in preview that I want to list out these ones. So as you see here, this is the plan for H1 financial year 2019, and these are some of the scenarios that are going to be enabled in H2 time period as well. As you see here, when you see three tick marks here, that means either they are generally available in H1 or they're going to be generally available in H2. When you see two tick marks here, that means they are either already in public preview or will be enabled for public preview in H2. Or in the private preview, the one single tick mark that you might see are private preview, where especially an example is Oracle to SQL DB MI, and as well as Oracle to SQL DB. These scenarios are currently in private preview. So if any of you are interested, please let us know so that we can enroll you into the private preview. But rest of the other source and target pairs will generally available, all of them, by H2 timeframe. Now I'm going to pass it to Pedro to talk about some of the programs that we have that really help you to do these migration journeys for us.
Yeah, thank you, Raj. The Fast Track for Azure is a program that's been going on for some time now. I wish that actually we could change to my screen, because I did put a link up there that allows it to go. Oh, there you go. We can do that now. Can you see my screen now? Assuming you can.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. So as I was saying, the Fast Track for Azure is a program that we designate that a customer success focused program. Basically, what it does is it builds upon years of building our own solutions in Azure, and so therefore proven practices, proven tools for us as Azure product group to engage with customers that are trying to build their solutions on top of Azure. And actually so there are a number of triaging principles. If you go to that link over there that on the top of the page, you'll be able to get more information about the program itself and how you can get attached to it. There are some minimum requirements in terms of customers that can access the program or not. But the point is, since we launched this over a year ago, we, as in the Fast Track team, has helped more than 1,000 customers either develop or deploy their Azure solutions, and you typically do that much faster than when you engage with this team, as opposed to doing it on your own. Now, we would encourage you to. I would encourage you to go to this link over there, know more about it, especially if you are thinking about either A, moving to Azure full-fledged, or B, developing a new solution in Azure. And Fast Track is not only for data, as we obviously, me and Raj, we work primarily in data, but it spans to a number of supported solutions. They have teams that engage in DevOps, in app modernization, in intelligent apps, in security, in data center migration. So there are a number of work streams that you can engage with Fast Track for Azure, which are not only data. So I just wanted to leave that out there because it can be an important asset for you to explore, especially if you are stepping just now into the Azure world. I also wanted to leave you with this. I did mention this segue earlier in this session. It would be very complementary to the one that we presented just now. This modernizing SQL Server the right way. SQL Server here being the moniker for SQL Server Engine, so therefore the one that powers Azure SQL Database and SQL Server on premises the same. And we do discuss there the migration process, especially how to plan how to use these tools that we've seen today in different ways, and namely DMA. We've seen here DMA in a different light than we approach in that specific session. So I think it would be a good, if you're interested in actually modernizing your SQL Server, especially in the scope of end of support, like I started this session today, this may be especially useful for you. Now, these are a number of migration related resources that I think can be very important if you are thinking about everything we discussed in this session. I would call out a couple of things, because we do tend to have very long URLs, very long links in Microsoft. We did create these short links for you to use so that they can get easier to remember, for you to reach very specific content. For example, the tools, be that SSMA or Data Experimentation Assistant or the Data Migration Service. You have here short URLs to get more information and even download, in some cases, those very tools. Now, the Database Migration Guide is pivotal in all this migration and modernization effort, because here I honestly love this Data Migration Guide, because you can select where you're coming from, where you want to go in terms of versions and platforms and different database vendors. And it will actually create a guide that is tailored specifically for your source and destination, guiding you through with recommendations about which tools you want to use, which methodologies you want to implement, what you want to think about when you are migrating. Because one last thing, because we did mention the SQL Server end of support, specifically the extended support that we are providing for some customers that want to leverage it. This is a short URL for an FAQ regarding that, so I'd encourage you to go see that. And at this point, Raj and I will be open for questions. And feel free to please come back with any questions you may have now, or feel free to ping us offline or on Twitter or email to follow up on anything we've discussed today.
Thank you so much, Pedro and Raj. That was a great presentation. Everyone, please stay tuned for our next session, Faster SSIS with Andy Leonard. And thank you everyone for attending. This is 24 hours of pass.